Hi, you're listening to She Shield, your one-stop pod for all topics personal safety. I'm your host, Sofia, and my goal is to help educate women and men on concealed carry, martial arts, and all topics self-defense. Before we start today, please take a moment to rate the podcast. If you all haven't seen social, we just passed 30,000 downloads. Thank you guys so much for helping us get there. It means the world to me. And if you have a few extra seconds today, scrolling up and hitting that rating would do just so much good for us. Thank you guys. This episode is sponsored by Big Tex Ordnance, your soon-to-be favorite retailer for all of your firearms needs. BTO believes in only selling high-quality gear for responsibly armed citizens, as well as providing pre- and post-sale support. BTO values firearms training and supports firearms instructors nationwide. They even pay for their own staff to train with high-level instructors to ensure that when you as a consumer reach out, you are taken care of. Today we have Kerry Murakami, known as Kato, on the podcast. He's an expert in defensive tactics and the founder of Rectitude Training. I got to train with Kato at the 2024 Combatives Association Summit. I'm sure you all will see a theme here. I'm trying to bring all those instructors on, but Kato absolutely made a significant impact on Lisa and I's time there, being willing to jump in and help us just numerous times. So Kato, I would love for you to introduce yourself to the speakers or to the listeners.
Hey, Sofia. Thanks for having me on. My name's Kerry Murakami. Everybody calls me Kato. Retired cop. I did 28 years in a suburb just here north of Chicago. Lifelong Chicagoland. Primarily focused on defensive tactics, which is the hand-to-hand stuff, firearms instructor, and then blending the firearms and the hand-to-hand stuff together in our scenarios. I was also a field training officer, but that was kind of short-lived. As far as like the defensive tactics side, I kind of pushed away from the traditional stuff that's being taught. It's kind of archaic. Nobody uses it anymore, even though it's still taught in the academy. Started creating my own content, probably about the last 15 years. And then part of what you took at the last summit was part of that, a snippet of a 2-day class. And the founder of Rectitude Training, which is based here out of Chicago. Rectitude Training was basically, I was kind of like pushed into doing this mainly because there were 3 incidences in 2020, which most people will recognize the 3 incidences. The first was, especially if you're from Chicago, was a Chicago Red Line shooting where 2 officers couldn't control one bad guy. They ended up shooting that guy. The second was George Floyd, which we all know what happened there. And then the third was Rashard Brooks, which was a Wendy's DUI case down in Atlanta, Georgia. Again, 2 officers couldn't control one bad guy. They ended up shooting that guy. I'm kind of known for my team tactics. We've been teaching team tactics for over 10 years. And after those 3 incidences, I was like, you know what? I'm going to push out team tactics. I got a couple other classes. And so in August of 2020, I opened up Rectitude Training, primarily focusing on law enforcement training. But I am slowly moving into the civilian market with a strong push from Craig Douglas. So, And then we talked briefly about CAS. I was part of the Facebook group a few years prior. I remember John talking about like this summit and he wanted to do it, and I was more than willing to help out. So 2023, I went down as a student. It was awesome. I had a great time. And then I was asked by a couple of instructors like, hey, how come you're not teaching? Would you like to teach? And I'm like, yeah, if I'm asked, I'm more than willing to teach. So combination of Cliff and Sam, they talked to John, and then I became part of the instructor cadre this year and taught a little 2-hour block.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. And then stuck around to help with the other classes. That was wonderful. I told you a bit pre-recording that Lisa and I appreciated pre-recording when I thought I hit record, that Lisa and I appreciated this look of acknowledgement of like, these women are gonna need some help. And you were so kind, and you didn't single us out in a way where it was shaming. It was just like, hey, I'm here. I've got you, in like the most professional way. So I was very appreciative of that. We both were.
I don't like to see anybody drown. I like really want to help people out. And
hey now.
And I know and I know you've trained a little hand to hand. I didn't know Lisa until like we started talking, and she was like, I have no clue what I'm doing. And I'm like, okay, like we can, I can help you with this. So yeah, it's always good to help out. I think, I didn't walk around as much this year as I did last year and train. I didn't mention this, but in February I had back surgery. I suffered from a spinal cord injury. It kind of came out of nowhere. I had a spinal fusion. So yeah, I'm still kind of screwed up from that. And then actually right after CAS, I went down to Tijuana, Mexico to get stem cell therapy. So it'll be a few months before I see some results from that. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that that'll work, because being numb from basically my torso down is not comfortable. So I would have like the takedowns I mentioned, I think during my block, like the takedowns aren't going to look exactly the same how I normally hit them, mainly because my legs don't work as well. And also like walking around, I can only stand on my feet for so long. But I definitely was more than willing to help out on occasion, and would sit back and kind of watch from the peanut gallery. But I'm more than willing to help, and people have questions. I get questions occasionally about this, that, and the other thing, and they're like, if I can find somebody that's willing to put their face on the internet, I'm more than willing to do a video. I don't put too many videos out, mainly because the content that I teach and the audience that I'm delivering it to, I have two groups that follow me, and I try to avoid plastering people's faces on the internet because of these two groups. One being Black Lives Matter, and the other one an anti-blue line group. So I try not to plaster those people all over the internet. So a lot of the stuff I do, I like redact their faces.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. And I think that's lovely. I know, as even from the civilian side, if people are filming during a class, I don't mind it. As a content creator, I understand you gotta do your thing, but it does sometimes make me think about, okay, what do I look like, and where is this going to go, and what if that was the one time I just screwed up that technique and then it goes everywhere. So I think that's actually a great thing you do, and I try to blur people out in the back of gym stuff. That's always been my thing. If I took even a mirror selfie, I would like pixelate the people in the back. So I actually have a lot of respect for that. I think there's a place for it. Absolutely.
It's a lot of extra work though, and trying to do it for videos is horrible. So I pretty much stopped shooting videos, or I'll shoot videos, but just take screenshots from there. And I'll focus in on like what it is I'm trying to get versus like up here.
Yeah.
So
we should talk about CapCut after the episode. They have an AI tracking tool I think would be very beneficial for you. And I think it's free, but CapCut AI tool, it's awesome.
Awesome.
I'd love to know, you've mentioned this before to me, but for the listeners, where did Rectitude Training come from?
Sure. So after those three incidences, I was like, okay, I'm going to open up a business. Craig's been bugging me for, I want to say close to a decade, about like hanging my own shingle. Same with Cliff. Cliff's like, dude, just go do something. And I'm like, I just kind of put it off. And so I happened to be like cleaning out a bookshelf, moving some stuff around, and I found this old book. It's titled Bushido. I cannot remember, Nitoba, I think is his last name. nonetheless, it's basically the virtues of the samurai. And I opened the book and I found the first virtue and I'm like, oh, rectitude. And I'm like, let me read this again. And I read a quick little paragraph and I'm like, rectitude. I'm like, so the meaning behind it is like justice, basically like righteousness, doing the right thing. And if you don't have the very first virtue, none of the virtues below mean anything. They're all garbage. So I was like, righteousness, like I can get behind that. Like that's what I'm trying to do for law enforcement. I'm literally just trying to do the right thing. I'm one person. If I can influence one cop to do the right thing, then I've done my job. So yeah, August of 2020, Rectitude Training was born. It's to me, it has a lot of meaning, and I try to reflect that when I talk about it, especially the training, because I believe training will help cops do the right thing versus like if you've never had the training, you don't know what to do. So here, perfect example. The block that you guys did was concepts of disarming bad guys. This is just what I call it. And I mentioned at the summit, I go, this might be your drunk Uncle Fester. And, a couple of people looked and they were like, I'm like, look, drunk Uncle Fester was actually a real person. He was a real person on a real call. And I was like, I'm going to steal that name and I'm going to use that in the future. But nonetheless, you don't want to shoot your drunk Uncle Fester. Like, even if is armed, like that's not really the goal. The goal is to disarm drunk Uncle Fester, have him put his gun away, yada, yada. And a lot of cops, their reaction is, if I see gun, my answers go to my gun. And sometimes there's not enough time to even go to your gun. Sometimes you need to like get to their gun first. And so I just rattle off some of the concepts, and it's something we've been working on for years, and just to try to like tweak it and make some application for a civilian to understand. Oh, I know my drunk uncle is always armed. He's always got a gun on him. Today he just happened to come show up at the family party. He's had too much to drink, and you're like, now he's getting a little rowdy, and you're like, he's got that gun on him. Like, how can we disarm him without escalating anything? Now, don't get me wrong. He turns around and now he's trying to hurt you because he's intoxicated. You're like, okay, I gotta, it's either me or him, right? I gotta try to take care of myself. So I always tell people, like, for cops, if your answer is to go to your gun, I'm giving you just a few other options. It's not to say that you have to do these, but here are a few options to work around just plugging somebody. And I don't believe anybody dealing with their drunk Uncle Fester would be like, yeah, I'm just going to plug them. That's the answer. Right. So that's kind of, to me, giving the options is the right thing. If all it was is like, hey, how do you disarm an armed person? Yeah, you just shoot him. Maybe, would you shoot your uncle? Probably not, or well, that wouldn't be the first thing that comes to mind. Let's put it that way. Right. So,
right.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. I appreciated that perspective for sure. And, one of the things I was going to ask you is how you define the disarming course. I think I mentioned to you earlier, the first thing that comes to mind for me, even though I've taken this class, is that, fastest disarm video we talked about,
right,
where the guy's in the auditorium of the high school and he has a kid pointing what I think is an inert pistol. It looks real, but who knows? It was like, the video was taken probably in the 90s, so forever ago. And so this guy has the gun to the back of this gym teacher's head, what it looks like, and he turns around and he does a like crossover, and I'd love to know more from your perspective what it truly is.
Yeah. So, like the 5 concepts that I just kind of throw out are like, look, we want to be on the back side of the weapon, right? Because nobody wants to be on the business end of the gun, right? So concept 1 is be on the back side of the gun, or at the very least, flank it. Concept 2 is control the weapon bearing limb. And it actually might be concept 1, concept 2, control the weapon bearing limb, and then stay behind the gun is, we flip those 1 and 2. Concept 3 is ground said bad guy. And it's not because I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt that I want to have a ground fight. I actually just want to take away his mobility. We all know that people are more athletic on their feet than they are on their backs. So I want to take him off his feet and onto the ground. Concept 4 is if we're going to attempt to disarm, we need to control the weapon bearing limb. We cannot be just fighting over the gun and have his arm mobile and free to do whatever he wants. Concept 5 is if we're going to go, if all the top 4 concepts fail and we need to go to lethal force, then consider staying attached, diminishing them enough so that you can exit safely. All too often, especially in law enforcement, it's just like create space and burn them down. That sounds great, but in all practicality, and you actually do this on force, that doesn't really work. You said you just talked to Cliff. Cliff, I use this all the time, and I give him credit. Ties and gunfights suck. I don't want rounds coming my way when I'm sending rounds your way. So those are the 5 concepts. It basically is. It's not the flashy disarms like you mentioned. It's very controlled. We start up with a 2-on-1 on the dominant arm, which is most people's right arm. And then from there, we work to keep the gun in the waistband primarily. If the gun comes out, we'll work a disarm from there. Nothing flashy. We just use leverage. And, we showed like 2 different takedowns and then a couple disarms while we were on the ground. That was kind of the 2-hour block.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Lisa and I talked about how we were so impressed that you were able to teach a class with people on both sides of the spectrum, the beginner civilian to the seasoned cop. So I just really want to brag on you there. We truly took a lot from that class, mostly figured out how much we didn't know, which I think is part of the equation, but really enjoyed it and look forward to next year. I would love to know how your jiu-jitsu training, and yes, you're right. I just had Cliff on. He's the episode before you. We talked a little bit about this, and it's one of my favorite questions to ask because I love jiu-jitsu personally. Mm-hmm. To me, it's more of a mental escape, but also, it's taught me some really fundamental things about how to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, how to frame, how to stand up tactically, and things like that. So I'd love to know how that has been incorporated into your training and how maybe it's played a role in officer safety and subject control without escalation of violence, if that's...
Sure. So I started jiu-jitsu kind of late in life. Everybody talks about like, oh, I saw the first UFC. Yeah, so did I. I was new on the job. I ordered the pay-per-view. I had been watching a different type of MMA or the precursor to it. It was called Pancrase. Those were on pay-per-view and they were being, broadcast out of Japan. I saw this grappling going on. I'm like, okay, this looks a little familiar because, growing up, most of my friends did a lot of judo. So we a lot of horseplay, getting thrown on your head. And so grappling was it was interesting. I started jiu-jitsu in 2000. a little bit later than some guys, but sometimes maybe a little bit before some other guys. And did that for 2 years consecutively. And then the gym closed, which kind of sucked. And after that, we just kind of like tooled around at my buddy's garage, like maybe we'd train twice a month. And then we were doing some stuff at my old police department. We'd break out the mats and we'd kind of roll around there. And then I started back up going to a gym, driving an hour and a half one way with both kids, driving, training for an hour, driving back with both kids, giving them dinner. Yeah, it was too much for the little bit that I was getting out of it. And so then I started doing some Muay Thai, and all the time, the whole time I was still a cop. So I would try to incorporate some of this stuff, but a lot of this stuff was so ground based that, when we ended up on the ground, we just had this big polyester pylon, right? It was just, and so the jiu-jitsu part didn't really come out. Then while I was doing Muay Thai, I trained with another guy who was doing some wrestling. So we were doing some wrestling, but it was like sport wrestling, folk style wrestling. So a lot of leg attacks, which work great on the mats, but not really well on the streets, especially if you're hitting your knee on the ground. And that kind of led me into doing some stuff with a couple other people, and they're like, oh, okay, I kind of like this wrestling stuff. And again, like I said, I started a little older, but I was still fairly athletic for my age. Then in 2008, a gym opened up not far from my house, and I was like, okay, I can't not go here. And I've been with New Breed Training Center ever since. And that's kind of really where the sportive side of jiu-jitsu really took off. And being the smaller guy, I was always kind of forced into playing guard, not really doing so much on the top. Went through the ranks, blue, purple, brown. When I finally got to brown belt, I really started focusing on, top side control, top control. And I would tell people like, hey, we'd slap hands, fist bump, and I'd be like, hey, I'm sorry. And they were like, sorry for what? And I'm like, you'll see. And so I would pull guard, and then I would sweep them or reverse the position, end up on top. And then I would just crush the shit out of people. And they would be on the bottom going, I now know what you're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, sorry. This is the only way to get better is to do it. Right. And through the evolution of like through jiu-jitsu, the journey, the path, the ups and downs, yada, yada. Like how I applied that to the street stuff was really when I met Cliff, and I don't remember when I met him, like 2012, give or take. Really meeting Cliff, and then, training with him, just discussing the differences between like collar ties and underhooks. And I'm like, I was a big collar tie guy. He's like, no. He's like, you got to really like start thinking more like Greco wrestling versus like folk style, freestyle wrestling. And that's kind of what made the big switch. And then I trained with Cecil, Paul Sharp, and Larry Linneman had a class called Dominating the Entangled Fight. I took that, and that was what kind of like, I had already kind of like looked at Greco wrestling, but that kind of like solidified it. They had a really well formulated, laid out lesson plan. And I just basically told them, I'm like, I'm stealing this. I'm bringing this back to my police department, and I'm going to make my cops do this. And so they were like, yeah, go for it. Shortly after, I trained with Craig, and that just reinforced the Greco wrestling. So I really only push the sportive side really to get guys who are training jiu-jitsu to get out of their comfort zone. And, you know, if you're training in the gym, you're training with like just a handful of partners, and, you know, you kind of know everybody's game. And so then you become like king of the mat or whatever you want to call it. And then you go compete and you realize like, maybe my jiu-jitsu is not so good. And you're like, okay, I got things to work on. Right.
Right.
And it's true. Like, you learn from your losses more than you do from your wins. So, I hear perfect example. I was a blue belt. So let's just say, I don't even remember what year this was. Anyways, nonetheless, 2009, give or take, I was a blue belt. I go to a competition. I'm competing against the guy my age, my size, my same belt level, and he passed my guard because I was exhausted, and he holds me down in side control, and I was like, and I lost the match off that guard pass, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, this guy is my size, and I couldn't escape side control. So instead of like asking my instructor, my professor, like, hey, how do I escape side control? I just literally, even to this day, I slap hands, fist bump, you pass my guard, that's when the roll starts. Like, I want to start in the worst possible position before I start. And so, yeah, it's not many people can hold me down because of that. And I think training your weaknesses is the one of the best ways to train. Also training your weaknesses when you're exhausted. Like, if you could do that, you stick with that kind of as a plan for, you know, whatever, you do it for a month or 3 months or 6 months or whatever. You're guaranteed to be good. You're guaranteed to be better than you were. So, yeah, I believe in that. And I think there's not so much jiu-jitsu that I teach anymore to cops. I mean, I do teach, like, one of my classes is titled Get Up. It's basically getting up from bad positions. It's a lot of hip escaping, and that's really what you need to get up. So that's the emphasis of the class, and that's the most like jiu-jitsu-y class that I teach. So everything else is primarily being in the weapons-based environment. So, you know, it doesn't matter what, stand up, ground, top control, bottom control, or bottom escapes. It's not as much jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is more of like the training methodology that we use. Like, we pressure everything. I mean, I know guys who are teaching, we'll say, jiu-jitsu to cops, and they're teaching basically like the technique portion of your class, but there's no added pressure. So I kind of like, so you're teaching the techniques of jiu-jitsu without validating whether this stuff works or not. And I have a problem with that. So, but yeah.
Absolutely. So how would you, if you could implement one big change into the curriculum like that, what would you say needs to be added? What type of drilling or?
Yeah, so we talked about rabbit holes, and we might go down this rabbit hole.
Let's go.
Have you heard of like ecological dynamics, like the teaching methodology?
I have not.
Okay, so the academic in you is now going to go down a rabbit hole.
Okay, I'm ready.
I really like the Echo D philosophy, but I'm torn, right? So the ecological dynamics is supposed to be like the training environment, the environment, not just the mats, not just the walls, but your partner. They all have say in this, right? And so, you know, we can do a technique over and over and over again, and maybe you get it, maybe you don't. We drill it, maybe you get it, maybe you don't. And they kind of like develop all these games to get you to do these techniques. And I love it. I love the concept, but then I think of the application. And part of me that has a problem with the application is, especially we're talking like combat sports, right? So I use the example of like the Kimura, right? It's pretty standard technique, double wrist lock if you're a catch wrestler, like, I know that pisses people off, but nonetheless, double wrist lock. And we know like the proper application of it. So why not just teach the proper application of it versus like, okay, I'm going to get you into this position and you need to figure out how to bend the arm to get your hands into place, and then bend the arm to, get it back in the proper place to get your opponent to tap. Right. And I think if, and again, I'm not an expert in this Echo D field. I'm playing around with some aspects of it, but I think because we know certain techniques are super effective, like just like a Kimura, like why not just start in that position, show them, hey, this is how it works roughly, and then I'm gonna put you two in this position here, and then you're gonna try and hit the Kimura, you're gonna try and defend the Kimura, right? And I don't know, maybe that's how guys are teaching it. I don't know enough about it. I've just started kind of like looking at it and talking to a few people about it. I know I should spend a little more time doing it, but I'm also trying to like run this business. So
yeah, like do a few things on the side. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
But it's a neat concept, and I can't tell you all the people who are pushing it. As far as jiu-jitsu goes, there's a guy, Greg Souders, he's pushing it. I've listened to a couple of his podcasts. Oh my God, there's a guy up in Milwaukee. I cannot think of his name. Primal MKE is the name of the gym. I don't know if that's the name of the podcast or not, but they're also pushing it. And there's some small factions are pushing it into law enforcement. I've never taken a class with them, so I don't know how they're teaching it, but it's something I want to take a little deeper dive into and spend some time with. But again, I'm a little torn. I'm like, I get the technical side and the drilling side, and I get the game side. So I don't know. So
right. I feel like that
might be homework for you.
Ooh, yeah. Okay. I'm down. Yeah. I feel like I need a little challenge anyway. So I could just, date a man, but I'll do this instead. That sounds good. Sorry, that was a really bad joke. Okay.
I got it. Okay,
good. Okay, sorry. Moving on. Okay, Sofia, you're a host of a podcast. Here we go. So,
that's B-roll.
I actually had. It absolutely is. Yes. Yes. Okay. And this is a question I actually had written down before, because you have experiencing consulting for departments. What other challenges have you seen in existing defensive tactics programs, and how would you advise agencies to enhance their training to reduce officer injuries? Excuse me. I feel like that's a big topic nowadays.
So, we've been doing team tactics for just now over 10 years. And I will say one of the things I do regret is not starting like running stats on our arrests and what we've been using, yada, yada. And it's something we should have implemented. I was a patrolman. That was way above my pay grade, so that just never happened. But I will say, since we implemented team tactics, one of the things that we for sure did was we reduced injuries to cops and to suspects. And how I know that is at the end of 2020, the insurance company, it's a risk management agency that kind of covers like 70 different agencies here in the Chicagoland area. They came to my chief and my deputy chief, and they asked like, hey, what are you guys doing in training that's different from everybody else? They threw me a bone. They said, hey, you got to talk to Kato. Kato's about to retire. He's got his own company. You need to talk to him because he basically is running that. And the biggest difference is we run team tactics. We have for, like I said, 10 years. You know, you might get this analogy. Your average police department in America, when they go to make an arrest, their officers look like 5-year-olds playing soccer, not, you know, MLS. They don't ever work together. In fact, one officer's probably helping the bad guy more than he's helping his partner. And God forbid there's now 3, 4, 5, 6 officers. Again, it just turns into this pile of strapalan. And, you know, I spoke to the insurance company, the risk management company, and we had this pretty long, lengthy Zoom conversation. They said, hey, we want to put you in front of our chief board. And, you know, if that goes well, which it did, they said, we'll make you a preferred provider. So anybody looking for training in the Chicagoland area who's affiliated with this insurance company, they refer them to us. And we basically push team tactics as kind of the foundation for every, you know, police department's defensive tactics program, because one, it works. And cops can sniff out bullshit. Cops can tell you, oh, that looks like that's legit. And they're also more than willing to, like, quote unquote, test it out while they're in the mat room, even though they're really not fit enough to do that. And so once they realize, like, oh yeah, it does, one, it makes sense, and two, it works. Usually the department is pretty much sold by that, and they usually bring me in. And, you know, like I said, I consult and teach for several different agencies across the Chicagoland area. And, you know, we usually always start with team tactics, and then they kind of build off of that. So, the next I tell agencies, like, look, you want your guys to be able to stay on their feet. I don't want to start off on a ground fight. I want them to learn how to stay on their feet, take people down when necessary. And then, so wrestling for law enforcement is the next class that I push. And then, with that, they usually push into the ground class, which is get up. It's getting up from bad positions. God forbid you fell. You decided to move straight backwards in a straight line. And you end up on your rear end and on the bad end of a fight. And so we work get up, and then the last class is that fight 2-4 with a gun. It's half weapon retention, half concepts of disarming bad guys. And yeah, I've been asked to do a bunch of other classes, but I don't feel. Remember how I said doing what's right for law enforcement? I don't feel that these classes are necessarily going to be right for law enforcement. So, you know, it'd be great for my pocketbook, but that's not what I'm here for. It's really to do the right thing. So, yeah, as far as consulting for departments, you know, I say I charge for consultation. I never have. I've had multiple departments hit me up, and they're like, so what would it cost to bring you in to just have a meeting? I go, nothing. How about we just talk now? And they're like, really? I had one agency, we were going through message back and forth. And I'm like, are you at the station now? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, how about I just drive over there? You're like 15 minutes from me. I'm like, I'd rather just meet you in person. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, let's just get this over with. Like, let's just talk. If you like me, great. If you don't like me, no harm, no foul. Like, let's move on. So yeah, if anybody wants to reach out and talk, like, let's talk. You know, you need help, I'll help you. You know, like, I had a couple of guys from a certain agency, and I told them flat out, I go, you need help doing with anything. If I'm free, I'll come down and help you. On me, not on you, on me. Went down, helped them. They took me to lunch. We call it even that's how I establish these relationships and how I get, business and grow the business. So, yeah.
Absolutely. No, that's wonderful. Oops. Thank you for sharing that, truly. And I am curious, how do you factor in the unpredictability of the job into the training?
So as far as, so part of it is, okay. So while I was teaching at CAS, we talked about takedowns. I don't know if you remember this, but we talked about like how if we disconnect, that a lot of times we'll land on our knees, right?
Yes, and I do remember this.
A lot of that just comes from training, landing on my own knees, watching people do the takedown incorrectly. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to do it incorrectly. And when I watch people over and over and over again, you see these tendencies. You're like, hey, you're becoming disconnected at the hips. And when you become disconnected at the hips and you take somebody down, what's going to hit? Your knees. And so you need to stay connected at the hips. And then why not just land on the person you're taking down? And when that happens, the injuries drastically reduce. Going back to that insurance company, they had asked me, hey, you seem to really know what you're talking about, yada, yada. Like, could you develop a instructor development program for, our agencies? And I go, no. And they were like, we pay you really well. And I go, it's not about the money. You don't understand. Like, I know I've been in law enforcement long enough to realize what you're going to send me. You're going to send me people who either want the instructor title, or already have that in title, and they don't train. They don't train on their own time. They like being an instructor. They like wearing either the red shirt or the shirt that says instructor on the back. But they don't really know anything more than the student that they're teaching. And your student knows that you're teaching bullshit. So, like, don't send me those people. This is not about the money. If this was clearly about the money, I'd sell my soul to the devil, and I would rake in all the cash, but I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror. Right. And I'm not that person. So right. I will not do an instructor class that I'm trying to start this like program to develop instructors. And one of the things is you have to be training on your own. Like you have to be on the mats regularly. And I'll know that because I know most of the gym owners here, and I can just call up and be like, hey, is so-and-so training? And
no pressure.
I can bring you onto the mats, and I can't roll with you right now, but I can have somebody else roll with you, and I'll watch you, and I can tell whether you know what you're doing or don't know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, that just tells me you're not training. If you're not training, you're not getting better. How are you going to help somebody else get better? You're not. That's not going to happen. So I have like my name and my word and my company mean everything to me, and I won't sacrifice that for the almighty dollar. So, when it comes down to it, it's like here I was teaching today. I was talking about like the rotation of the arm and how these muscles and ligaments in your shoulder get really tight if you're doing this, and they don't get tight if you're doing that. And the people were like, how the hell did you figure that out? And I go, I don't know. I know the body fairly well. And just years of training, just being on the mat, you just realize like, okay, that really sucked when my arm went like that. Like, why is that? Right. And, like how do you teach that to somebody? Hey, do this and do that. Well, why? Well, here, let's do it. It's like I can teach somebody that, but will they remember it, and will they pass that on to the people that they're teaching? That takes just years of just being on the mats. So I'm not really looking to create an instructor development class. I'm in no rush to do it. And in all reality, there's only a couple people right now who are part of that mentorship program and who are on track to eventually be an instructor under me. But there's too much on the line for you just to willy-nilly give somebody a piece of paper saying you're an instructor. So, and going back to just injuries, like, random injuries just happen. It's part of the nature of the game. Anything physical, anything can happen, which inherently, it sucks, but you just got to own up to it and be like, shit happens. I mean, here, I teach for the state of Illinois for one of the local mobile training units. And I had a kid come up, and he was like, he was like the first person to show up. We started having a conversation. He's like, I'm a lifelong martial artist. He's like, I saw your class. He's like, I looked you up. He's like, you were a black belt. He's like, dude, I wanted to train with you. So I do the PowerPoint presentation. It's like an hour long, and then we head to the mat room. We're literally 5 minutes into the mat room, and we're pummeling. That's all we're doing is pummeling. I think it was his middle toe hits the shin of his partner, breaks. Like 5 minutes. We're not even fully warmed up. Broken toe in 5 minutes. And so we had to stop the class, do all this paperwork, yada, yada, right? And he was like, dude, he's like, I've been training for like 20 plus years. And he's like, and this broken toe happens in your class. And I'm like, shit happens, man. It just does. I can't prevent that. I mean, the only way I could have prevented it is if he was wearing wrestling shoes. And at the place we were at, they didn't want shoes on the mats. So nobody was wearing shoes, so it is what it is, you can't prevent all of them. So,
right. What are some things, as I think I like to refer to John Valentine's intro to the summit, how he talks about cooperative versus competitive training. How do you explain that to your students coming from the law enforcement background, when, like, really in real life, I'm sure it's 0 to 100 in a couple of seconds. So,
yeah, I basically tell my students that, look, unless you're training on a regular, so and jiu-jitsu is the most popular. So, and to segue just briefly, like, I do push jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, I love jiu-jitsu, but I think jiu-jitsu is not the end all be all. What I do and why I push jiu-jitsu more than anything else is it is something that you can do very regularly, very hard, for a prolonged period of time. And generally for an adult, it's relatively safe. I do tell people, like, hey man, if you're in your early 20s, go train some judo, go do some wrestling. But as you age and you're now pushing into your mid 30s and into your 40s, like, wrestling and judo are too hard on your body. Like, go start jiu-jitsu. Once you start kind of grasping the jiu-jitsu, then find the wrestler in the room, find the judoka in the room, and spend a little money and pay them in privates, and then learn some judo and some wrestling. Take care of your body. And then, now I'm forgetting your question.
No worries at all. How you kind of explain cooperative versus competitive training. Yeah. So
I tell them, look, if you're not training on a regular, your body's not conditioned to go 100%. And I don't care what kind of athlete you were back in college, who you thought you were in high school, you're not that person now. And here, even the guy who tells me, well, I got my blue belt, but I haven't trained in the last 5 years. I go, same thing for you, buddy. I go, your body's not conditioned to go spar right now. You need to go incrementally from cooperative to eventually competitive. I love Craig's terms, but I don't use them all the time, primarily because when cops hear competitive, they just go crazy, right? And I can't have that in my class. So I just tell them, look, we're gonna build in resistance, and right now we're going here like almost zero resistance. Just do the technique, get the reps. I go, now I want your partner to give some resistance, 30, 50, 70%. We typically don't go over 70% because I think there was a study, it was like 80% is like the max you can go, and then you stop really learning what you're doing. I just use 70 because I've always said 30, 50, 70. 70 is a good buffer. If they go to 80, they go 80. I just don't want them going 100, 120, full on crazy, because the only thing they're going to learn there is that they're out of shape. And I hear it all the time. Yeah, I went to my first jiu-jitsu class, and I'm like, hey, what did you learn? I'm out of shape. Shit, I could have told you that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you didn't have to, you had to learn something else other than that.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, they don't, because they went too fast. And that's
okay.
Well, here.
It's interesting.
You may not be able to relate this. I'm trying to think of a story that maybe you'd be able to relate to, but here. You've been driving for like 16 years, right? Or, I'm sorry, 10 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So first time you got behind the wheel,
yeah,
you were pretty nervous, right? Everything's happening really fast.
Absolutely.
You're like, oh my God, like white knuckling the steering wheel, right?
Right.
You're probably like focused on like the speed limit, using your turn signals, yada, yada. But now 10 years later, you're sipping coffee, I'm not saying texting, but like, maybe fast forwarding something on your podcast or whatever you're listening to, like maybe hitting the next on the Spotify to the next song. You're doing other things, right? That's the same thing in jiu-jitsu. Like when I teach you a technique, I want you to go slow. I don't want you to go fast, because you're going to miss, step, 3, 7, 10, whatever, right? You're going to miss all those steps in between, which are crucial. And then you're going to be like, how the hell did I end up here? That didn't look anything like what Kato just showed me. It's because you went too fast, right? You need to learn in increments. You need to learn essentially step by step. And it's not until you actually learn to do it that you can like skip steps. Have you seen the things where they jumble the letters inside the words, like the first letter and the last letter are the part of the word, but then the middle words or middle letters are switched, and you can still manage to read the sentence?
Oh, yeah, I forget what that phenomenon is called. But
I don't know what it's called either, but it's the same thing, right? You know the word. Your brain is just like trying to process the word, and once you do it, you get it faster and faster. It's the same thing in any physical sport or whatever you're trying to learn. So, yeah. I just try to keep people like slow. And then I say, hey, look, you guys want to speed things up. You're naturally going to speed things up. Just kind of like the adrenaline's going to kick in. You're like, we just got to do it fast. And I just try to layer in the resistance slowly, so that they're now realizing like, oh, this is not as easy as like what I just showed with no resistance, right? So even when I do demos, like I'll pull somebody up and I'm like, hey, I want you to give me 50% resistance. And I'm like, as soon as they grab me, I'm like, that's more than 50% resistance. I'm just telling you, right? Like I know, I may not know you and I may not know what your 100% is, but if I say, okay, I want you to, here, and I've done this too. I'll tell them, grab me 100%, like as tight as you can. All right, now back off 50%. And then they're like, oh, okay. And I go, start from here. And then they at least they now know and have an understanding of like, okay, this is, yes, I went to 100%. I'm going to back it off and then I can start from there. And then I can either, if I say, hey, these next 5 reps, I want you to go 30%, then they know they need to back down even further. Or if I say, you can go to 70%, of course, their eyes light up and they go, now they ramp up. Perfect. Right. And I think you have to give the students, whatever it is, cooperative, competitive. You have to give them that, the buffer to go figure out what it is they need to do.
Are you in search of top-notch gear that exceeds your expectations? Look no further than GPS, brought to you by Go Outdoors Incorporated. GPS has been dedicated to crafting the finest products for hunting and shooting since 2002. As someone who frequents the gun range, my GPS bag is a staple to safely and effectively haul my gear. My personal favorite is the GPS Tall Range Backpack, which makes walking USPSA stages simple and organized. Their specialized bags are designed to keep all of my valuable equipment secure and organized. With GPS, you can experience the ultimate peace of mind. There are 3 exciting product lines: GPS Tactical, GPS Wild About Hunting, and GPS Wild About Shooting provide the perfect solution for your specific needs. So whether you're on a hunting expedition or hitting the range, GPS is your reliable companion. To find a bag that fits your needs, use code SHESHIELD20, that's SHESHIELD 20, to save and to support the pod. Again, that's SHESHIELD20 at checkout. Absolutely. Sorry, I'm in that warehouse and sometimes I'm like, man, there's no way that wasn't a person, but we're good. We're totally good. I'm just going to grab my gun. Hold on one second. Ayo. Okay, just grab this. Cool. I'm just going to have this next to me. Excuse me. Cool. Set this down right here. Okay, cool. We're fine. We're totally fine.
You can leave right on the desk. I'm totally cool with it.
I might just do that. I mean, we get taken down on social probably, but I do.
Push it behind the cup. You're fine.
Right? Yeah, totally. There's a staircase right. I could hear someone coming up. At least I'm betting on that. Anyway, okay. It is October. It's spooky season. So
you use the cup as an improvised weapon, and then you grab the gun.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much. Wouldn't that be crazy? I've actually had something happen on the episode before. I was about to interview Chris Cook of Odyssey Training, and this guy in the hallway, we'd had problems with him as a tenant. He would take phone calls on the loudest speaker and talk at the... Just think about how you talk to someone when you're excited about something like that loud. Dude was just talking about gigs he was booking. That's it. And so I stepped out and I was like, hey, sir, do you think you could potentially take your conversation elsewhere? And of course, we've talked to management about him before. And he literally put his hand up and was like, nobody cares about what you're doing. And I'm not going to lie. I've escalated things. I was like, you need to get the fuck back in your apartment. I was so sick of it. I was trying to record an episode, and later I was
B-roll.
That was not,
Lisa,
yeah, right.
We got more B-roll.
That was not good of me to do that. I definitely should have let someone else handle it, but I was so PO'd because I was we could barely get the episode filmed in time. And anyway, and so I sat back down and I was anyway, and I was shaking. So if something happened on camera, I mean, it would just be, you're right. It would just be material for social.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Moving on. I really appreciate that perspective. And I think it gives some insight to how us, the students, can feel for how much resistance our partners are giving. I've talked to many women and men who have been turned off by the sport or just training in general because their partners went too hard and caused injuries. So taking the time to tell someone, hey, I think you're doing a bit more than 50%. And I've never heard of that technique to say, hey, give me 100, back it down 50. So
yeah,
that's great to know.
It's just another training tool to kind of get
Yes.
people, to understand the level that you're talking about. Because I could say, hey, 50%, and your 50% is going to be different than Lisa's 50%. It's going to be different than my 50%. It's going to be different than Sam's or Craig's or anybody's 50%. So, as long as we're not going 100%, I kind of don't care. So, but I kind of notice when I use Craig's terminology, like as soon as I throw out like competitive, it's kind of like, okay, we're going to go full on. And I'm like, I don't want you guys going full on. We're not there yet. You know, when I'm ready to go competitive, then I'll push that. But I very rarely do I do that in a law enforcement class, mainly because most cops are kind of fragile. So, yeah.
Totally fair.
Something you got to take into consideration. They don't like hearing that they're fragile, but they are.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I wonder why. What a fragile thing of them. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, that's good to know.
Their egos are fragile. Their bodies are fragile. They think they're tough, but they're really not. They think the best line I know is the best line I love to hear is like, bro, you don't know my mentality. And I go, do you shoot on your own time? Do you train on your own? Like, do you do jiu-jitsu? Do you do anything hard other than like go to the gym? Like, do you do anything difficult? And they're like, bro, like you don't know. No, I know your mentality. Like, you don't have mentality. Like, you're using that term to kind of like make me think like you're tough, but I know different. You know, like I know people who train on their own. You'd have no clue. You're like, this is like an IT geek. You know, he is literally like a murderer on the mats. And it doesn't matter whether it's jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, like he would kill you on the mats. But this dude like has a pocket protector when he goes to work, you know, and you're like, that dude I'm afraid of.
Right.
Like, you not afraid of at all. Like, I got to suffer for like 30 seconds and deal with your, spazziness. And then after that, we're good, so.
Right. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Oh, that's such a good comparison. I love it. Speaking of gaps in training and knowledge, from the civilian side, all of this is so new to me. I don't have this exposure to you. It's something you had to see every day of your training. And I'm sure as it evolved over the years as well. Where else are the gaps in training when it comes to protection, and how does that compare to civilian training? For example, I'm thinking of the fact that all social media for gun content, and I'd like to think I follow a variety of influencers in the space, or instructors, whatever you want to call them, is like concealment techniques. With the women's side, it's a lot of concealment outfits, right? How to dress around the gun with your style, which is important information, but there's so much of that in high concentration compared to things like weapons-based entanglement, throwing a gun into grappling or catch wrestling. So where would you say that gap is in the firearms industry, in law enforcement?
Yeah. So, I mean,
in general,
I will say, and this is just my 2 cents, I think the civilian training community and the law enforcement training community is exactly the same. It's sub 3%. I think sub 3% of the people who carry guns, whether it's on the law enforcement side or it's on the civilian side, train beyond getting their initial certification and maybe go shoot once a year to make sure like their gun goes bang. It's like settling for mediocrity. We're absolutely okay just sucking. And I'll tell you from personal experience, and a lot of the stuff that like I harp on, I'm 100% guilty doing. So I graduated the academy, police academy, and I was a horrible shooter. Horrible. I barely passed. I went to the department, again, barely passed the qual. And it's not a hard qual. Like, now after training and becoming better, it's not a hard qual. I could shoot that qual in my sleep. But I was always, me personally, I was absolutely afraid of being like labeled the lowest common denominator. Like, I did not want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the guy who's like oh, Kato's about to show up. Let's clear this up. Let's call him off. We don't need him here. Yada yada. So I was training my ass off to become a better shooter, just like on the hand-to-hand side. I was training my ass off to become a better hands-on person. I just feel that, society's okay with being mediocre. Like, I never wanted to be the mediocre guy. I never wanted to be lowest common denominator. I didn't have to be like the best shooter, and I didn't have to be the best guy, but like, here, what I tell people, and especially new kids, like, so I tell this quick story, and the story, again, it was this cop was like, I don't trust this person, yada yada, and I'm like, what do you mean you don't trust this person? I don't know if they're gonna be like, they're gonna show up and like be in the fight if the fight happens. And I go, like, you got no experience. Like, I've never seen you train. You're the lowest common denominator here. You know what I mean? Like, this person's been on the job. They've proven themselves multiple times. So if anything, you're the lowest common denominator, and you need to prove to the rest of us. It's not we need to prove to you. And he was like, oh shit. And I go, yeah, dude, like, check yourself. Like, you're a nobody here. You're brand new. Like, you got like a year on the job. Like, you think it's not to say you're not important, but like, I've seen other people do the job, and I've seen them jump into fights and all kinds of chaos. I've seen them on the range. I was their firearms instructor. I've seen how pretty much the entire department shoots. I can tell you who's good and who's not good. You're the person I don't know. You need to prove to me, like, it's almost like the entitlement, like, oh, well, I'm here. Yeah, you're here, but you haven't done anything. Like, do something and then ask, like, about, the status of things, I will say that the kids now coming on, like, they're having a little more exposure to the firearms and how mediocre things are, and how, like, competition shooting aids in that, right? I was talking to another cop about, like, doing competition shooting, and I want to get into it, and I really want to do it. I've been trying to push my old department to do it. I had set up like barrels and made these walls out of snow fence, and we would run like mini, courses of fire down in the range, and everybody loved doing it. But then when you try to organize something, they're like, oh, I don't want to do that, and I don't want to come in on my day off or my own time. And I'm like, the department's going to give you the ammo. You know what I mean? Like, other than you driving in, you can shoot. Like, I don't understand what the problem is, right? Like,
right.
We can create a nice little board of like who's got the best times, yada yada, and no interest. And it's, I think on the other side of it is, I think part of it, they understand that there's going to be some pressure involved, and they don't want to see their name down here.
Right.
Yes. And like, I don't claim to be a great competition shooter. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do it my first time. I think my only hesitation right now is I can't really feel my legs, and the last thing I want to do is be like running around with a gun and I trip and fall. My legs are.
That'll do it.
I can walk no problem, but when I run, I feel like I'm a special ed kid. To use Cliff's term, touchdown. Do you remember that term? Right.
Nope.
You don't remember that term?
I don't think I do. Nope.
You're going to have to send Cliff a text and say,
okay.
Kato asked me for you to define touchdown.
Got it. Okay. I'll do that. Episode follow-up. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, I just don't trust myself right now. So I'm not doing a crap ton of movement. I'm doing some dry fire, and I got that ACE VR system.
Oh, nice.
I like that. That's a lot of fun.
Good. I have heard all good things about it. I feel like, do you only really have to have a MetaQuest?
Yeah. So you have to have the headset, and then you have to go to ACE VR. You have to purchase a handset, basically a grip mod, and then the MetaQuest hand thing fits inside and
cool. Okay, I think I'm gonna do it.
I mean, eventually, you might need to modify a holster if you're gonna train with the holster, but even that shouldn't be too big of a deal, because I mean, awesome. You're doing enough dry fire from a holster,
right?
You're just saving ammo, really, using the MetaQuest. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Yeah, it's fine. It's time. When you hear about something so many times, you're like, okay, fine, I have to try it.
Well,
this is one of those things.
The MetaQuest, I think when I bought it, it was like just over $300. So it's like a case of ammo, right? Yeah. And then you got the ACE VR. I don't remember how much the headset cost, but you're like, it's saving you ammo down in the long run. It's right. Stuff you're going to shoot anyway. So why not essentially, once you pay for it, you're shooting for free. So,
that makes sense. Yeah. I think I got my Quest off of Facebook Marketplace for like $200-$300. So
yeah. So now you just got to go to ACE VR, Google it. I don't know the exact website, but
okay.
Yeah. I can't give you a coupon code or anything like that. I'm a nobody.
That's okay. No, that's totally fine. The suggestion is great. Seriously.
Yeah. But if Ace VR wants to give me a coupon code, I'm, just Kato 20 or something like that. I'm cool with it.
I like that. Yeah. Kato 50. No, just kidding. That's awesome. Absolutely. I would love to know, for someone listening, whether or not they're civilian, law enforcement, military, and they want to get into the weapons-based entanglement world more. Maybe they've done a little bit of grappling, or they're only on, say, the competition shooting side. What would you say some good first steps would be?
My 2 cents is go train with somebody from the Combatives Association. Go find somebody. I mean, the clear cut number one on the list would be Craig Douglas. Go train with ShivWorks. You can train with anybody else who's affiliated with ShivWorks. Cecil, Paul, Larry's not teaching, I don't believe, anything anymore. Unfortunately, William passed, so he's not in the picture. And the only person from the ShivWorks Collective I've not trained with was Chris Fry. I'd like to fix that, but he seems pretty busy out in Nevada. The next would be like Cliff, Ben Aubin from Red Beard Combatives. You got John Valentine. You got, I think guys teaching some stuff also. But yeah, I mean, there are enough people out there who are teaching, the entangled gunfight, that 0 to 5 foot range, that you can train with people like that. And that would be a great place to get some of the fundamentals and then figure out what it is you liked, what you didn't like, and then figure out what you're going to take back, what you're not going to take back. And then I would say do it more than once, because you can come back. I guarantee you've probably only grasped a quarter of it, really. And then come back, take another class, or take it with another person. Who and I've not trained with Ruben, but Ruben does a a primer to ECQC. I don't remember what he calls it. Paradox.
Yes.
But Ruben from Paradox, he's affiliated with ShivWorks, and he has like a pre-ECQC kind of class. That'd be a great place to start. And he's a cop. So if you're a cop and you don't really want to train with civilians, which I think is stupid, go train with Ruben. But take a class like that. That'll give you some of the foundational things that you really need to focus on. I would suggest you take it again, just so that you are now grasping a little more. And then you can go off and play on your own, I think a lot of, I did the same thing. I was like at white belt, I was like playing around with blue guns, and, you know, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I kind of like it, but I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And then you start training with other people, you start seeing some stuff on the internet, and you're like, okay, that's interesting. I wonder if that would work. And you start playing around, and I think that's probably the best way to learn. I think buying a blue gun and throwing it on the mats and just like, you know, wrestling over it, I think there's some value there, but there's no structure, because it's just kind of like, well, we're just going to roll around with the blue gun or whatever. Where if you have at least an instructor who's kind of done that before, he can go, okay, hey, look, well, let's set this up a little bit better. Like, you're a good guy with no gun, and you're wrestling your own drunk Uncle Fester who's got a gun. Whether he pulls it out, that's completely up to him. Excuse me. Maybe you deny his draw. So I think they'll, like, the adage of like fuck around and find out is a great adage. I think it's a great way to experiment. But going to a class is probably your best bang for your buck.
Absolutely. I agree. I think 25% is generous. When I attended Craig's, I feel like I got 10% of it. And I remember just taking a mental note and being like, okay, got to do this 9 more times. And then I will have the full experience. And it was really cool to see people that had gone back to his class for the 3rd, 4th time. And it really said a lot about how much value there was to it. And
sure.
I look forward to more classes in the future as well.
I think the other thing too is, like, there's plenty of stuff out there on the internet for you to like watch, and, you know, especially if you've taken Craig's class before and you've actually taken it, you can go, oh yeah, I kind of remember him talking about this. Yeah. And then, you know, he takes some deep dives and we'll put it out on video. So I think you can still learn from that, but I think you still need to actually physically take a class with said person. And here, perfect example, not to name drop, but I had been playing with this, like, so here at the Combatives Summit, I taught like this wrist lace, and I had been playing with the wrist weave, and I kind of abandoned it and kind of came back to it, come back to it. And then I trained with Raul Martinez. He owns Rogue Methods, and we started playing. He started doing it, and I was like, oh, I'm going to play with this. I'm going to go back to this and play with it some more. And that's where the whole wrist lace kind of came from, and taking a really deep dive with my guys, and just experimenting more and more. And before you know it, like, you get a product out of it. So, you know, all props to Raul, you know, because he made me really look at that position again. So.
It's wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Seriously, my goal is to bring awareness to the gaps in this industry, utilizing this platform and the reach that I have to do that through. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I think that, you know, like, the combatives is like the meld of like the hand-to-hand guys who just like to fight, and then the shooting, like, the shooters just like to shoot, and they think that, you know, like, both sides just think like the answer is like, oh, it's just a gun problem, so I'm just going to use a gun. Right. And then, I mean, it even goes to the knife guys. Like, knife guys are like, I carry a knife. The knife's the answer. And you got the hand-to-hand guys are over here, and they're like, the hand-to-hand stuff's the answer. And I'm like, no, you got to be able to blend all three together, or everything together, even the verbal stuff that, like, Craig was teaching. If you don't have good verbal skills, and all you're going to deal with, or your answer is a hammer for everything, no, it doesn't work. So we need to be well-rounded, take that multidisciplinary approach to self-defense. And so if you're a masterclass shooter, like, hey, here, perfect example. I got a cop buddy of mine who's a masterclass shooter, and he's like, how do I get good at jiu-jitsu? Same way you got good at shooting. Like, unfortunately, you're going to have to pull back a little bit on the shooting side and then ramp up the jiu-jitsu side to get better at the hand-to-hand stuff, right? And then, you know, I'm like, that's how you get better at anything. Like, you became a master class in however many years, like you're going to be, if you focus your attention on jiu-jitsu, you're going to excel faster because you already know how to excel from one aspect, right? So, yeah, it can happen, but I think some people are a little more apt to like realize that they suck and they don't want to suck anymore and they just want to get better. And so that drives them, right? Some people, in here, cops specifically, cops will go through a bad incident and then they'll survive it and they'll go, woof, I survived it. And they're like, hey, you know, we could train this and make you better. No, I'm good. I survived it. Like, you know, this could happen again. Right. And you may not survive it. Like, let's train it, you know, and no, I'm good. And then there's other cops who are like, holy shit, that was a close call. I need to get more training. And, you know, that unfortunately is the bad way to learn. Like Craig talks about, like, you know, I call it OJT, on the job training. Like, on the job training sucks. Like, you don't want to learn on the street. You want to learn in training, make all the mistakes in training where you really aren't going to get killed versus like making a mistake out there and could be the last thing you do.
Absolutely. That was definitely eye-opening for me when I attended his course. And I felt almost, at the time I was like, oh, I'm just a civilian. This doesn't apply to me as much. But because I don't subject myself to those situations as much as police officers do. But it applies to both, like you mentioned earlier, instead of waiting for that to happen, getting ahead of it. And with the simulation guns they have, it's an incredible opportunity. I don't know if I told you the story of getting really nervous about getting shot by a sim round.
No.
So I asked Craig to shoot me, and I just remember him being like, you really want me to just shoot you? And I was like, yes. And he was like, all right. And I took off running. I was like, never mind. And then he shot me in the left butt cheek, because by that point I was like zigzagging, like trying not to get hit. And he was just like, so by that point I looked back and all of the students had come back out from the break to like watch what was happening, because I was like screaming. And then it wasn't that bad. So it was just like, I was so panicked by it that I couldn't focus in the class. I was like, yeah. I don't want to get hurt. And so I was like, I walked up to him and I was like, I need you to take that panic away by just getting it over with. And he was like, okay. And
all right. You're paying me to do this. Okay.
Right. He's like, oh, cool. Yeah, no, he was great about it. He's become one of my just favorite, just people in the industry in general. So yeah.
Yeah. He has that way about him.
Doesn't he? Yeah. Yeah. What a great group of guys. Like I'm just so thankful to be even in like somewhat in this little circle on the periphery, even the blast radius, you know, and get to sit down with individuals like you. And I'm so excited to see where your civilian instruction journey goes. What do you think the next big step is for you to get into that as we wrap up this episode?
So, I don't remember. So right after I AI'd for Craig, I think it was in May, I had a 4-hour drive home, and I was really contemplating like, do I do this? Do I not do this? It's not that I don't trust Craig, and I don't think he would try to steer me wrong, but you know, I really like the 4 hours, like my whole brain was spinning, and I was like, okay, well, I was, going to Florida with my girlfriend and her son, and I had this spinal cord injury, so I wasn't really going to be walking around doing the whole Disney thing. So I just put pen to paper and just spent like the entire time there pretty much just like penning out like this curriculum, which is very similar to my law enforcement Fight 2-4 of the gun class. And it's going to be a civilian version, so, you know, guys will be able to carry appendix or strong side hip. I mean, however they want. I've debated whether I'm going to do some force on force in that class. I really want to, but that's just an added expense. I think that is really the way to go. And I would like to actually beta test that a few times before I put it out to the open in the public and actually like accept money for it. So, that will probably happen in the first half of next year. And then I'll probably push it out the latter half of next year for, like open enrollment. I think especially here in Illinois, it's hard to find a good live fire range to do live fire. A lot of places don't allow you to use that downward angle that we would use from thumb pectoral. So that is probably the biggest issue of going live fire on that side. So I might just keep it all blue guns and sims. And then from there, that would be a 2-day class, good Saturday, Sunday class. So we'll see. I'm not 100% sure. I'd like to iron out some of the kinks first with the beta class and then go from there. So I'm in no rush.
If you need a volunteer,
all right.
I'll just fly right there. Let Lisa and I know, and we'll be on our way.
Yeah, so. I'm not even so... I was talking to Aaron Giannetti, and he's like, you want to run a beta test? He's like, come out here. And I'm like,
yeah.
He's like, I got a whole gym of like animals out here. He's like, they'd love to beta test. And I'm like,
how fun. I love Aaron. He's awesome.
So,
yeah.
I want to run some beta tests, and I want people, and I say this at the end of every class, like, I went to grade school just outside Cabrini Green, and you probably don't even know this, but we played Yo Mama jokes like every day. Like we would insult each other every day.
I do know a yo mama. I almost said yo ma. I was thinking of the cellist.
But
I do know yo mama jokes.
Okay, so we would do that from 3rd grade to 8th grade. I did this basically every day. Right. So if you think you're going to hurt my feelings, it's just not going to happen. I'm like dead inside. Right. So I tell people, like, please give me honest feedback. I can take it. You know what I mean? Like, give me the healthy criticism, or just say, no, this sucked. And then tell me why it sucked. You know what I mean? Like, don't just tell me it sucked, because it doesn't help me at all. Right. So I'm totally good with honest feedback, and I'm just trying to make this class better than the last time I taught it. So, I'm not here for, pretty much all the instructors that taught at CAS will tell you, like, I'm not here for the fanboys, I'm not here for the likes and the follows. I'm here to just spread some information, hopefully not get you killed. So yeah, just make you a little bit better. So, like I said, beta tests, hopefully, I was hoping to get something, at least one done by the end of the year, but it's not going to happen really. So sometime early next year, hopefully run a couple of those, and then, we'll see.
Wonderful. That's so very exciting. I look forward to that. And you did get some practice with Lisa and I, so there's your vote of confidence for today,
awesome.
Or your 2 votes of confidence.
I appreciate it. You guys did awesome. I mean, Lisa having no experience, like in being her first summit, kudos to her, because it's intimidating to go into that room with essentially like 60 dudes that you don't know about. And some of those, I mean, I was approached by several people like, hey, do you know who that guy is over there? And I'm like, no clue. He's like, that dude's a Green Beret. And I'm like, oh, and like I've had people like, he's not just a Green Beret, like that dude's like really like, he's legit, like as they come. And I'm like, shit, he didn't walk in the room like, hey, you know who I am? I'm like,
right.
I'm like, oh no. I'm like, and he was super humble.
Of course, but they always are. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So
yeah,
it was, that's probably one of the best here, it is to me the best part. I love learning, but I love hanging out with people who are all like-minded. I had so much fun, like just hanging out with all the other instructors and even the students, that I got to hang out and meet. And it's definitely like the highlight of the year, to travel and go train and teach and, see old friends and meet new people. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, I completely agree. Yeah, I actually, Lisa and I met one of the cops from there. He was like, yeah, I'm going to New Orleans after this. And we were like, cool, can we go with you? And he was like, yeah. So we went with him. We just had so much fun. It's a great place to meet. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I'm glad you guys are looking to come next year. Dates already out,
absolutely.
Right?
They are. Yeah, absolutely. I need to coordinate with John, but yeah, oh my gosh, I will be there. I'm super excited. Awesome. It's in the same spot, right?
Yep. Same spot.
Awesome.
Yep. D'Iberville. Yeah. Wow. And then, you're going to bring your own, nice little contingency.
Contingency?
Yeah, you're gonna bring like a She Shield van
that's
down.
The goal.
Right?
Yeah, I'd really like to do that because I like what Scott had going on with the Ironsides podcast. I was so jealous of his setup. I was like, dude, I'm gonna copy you next year. I really hope that's cool. I'll have to see how I can do that and make sure it works with everyone's schedule. But because that was a total wing. I literally set up my GoPro as I was driving down to D'Iberville. I was like, this is so bad. I was watching a video on it and then like
trying to set it up at the same time. But Lisa was driving. Yeah.
Lisa was driving. Yes, of course. As I went to go pick her up. But yes, exactly. Yeah. Wonderful. And something I do, Kato, before I end every episode is ask the guest speaker to leave the listeners with something. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Get off your ass and go train.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love it.
That's simple, right? Like,
awesome.
I tell the cops I teach and I'm around frequently. I'm like, do something every day to just make yourself a little bit better, right? So it could be I'm watching a video. It could be I'm listening to a podcast. It could be I'm reading a book. I don't care. It could be go shoot some rounds. Or go train jiu-jitsu. I don't really care what it is, but go do something and vary it up. Do something every day to just be a little bit better. So, yeah, I'm still trying to do that. I'm still trying to read books and listen to podcasts and do my own thing. So, like I mentioned earlier, I was dry firing before we started. So,
yeah, you were.
Right. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah. That's the best advice I can give you.
I love it. It's wonderful advice. Thank you for that. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast with your schedule. And I'm excited to see where your training company goes.
Thanks for having me. It was really good to see you and meet Lisa at the last Combatives Summit. And I hope to see you guys, or I'm sure I'll speak to you between now and then, but I hope to see you guys in next year.
Absolutely. And for those of you listening who would like to find Kato, I have linked his website and socials, even though he's not trying to become the next influencer, link those anyway in the resources, which are the notes below the title. For exclusive content, I've mentioned a few times, Lisa makes those awesome shorts all over, including Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Livefire. So please follow us on there. It is at She Shield Pod. A special thank you to all of you who have contributed to the 30,000 downloads. That was really big for us. If you like the podcast, you can help by liking, subscribing, and leaving a review. And lastly, if you or anyone you know is a firearms owner experiencing a crisis, look into holdmyguns.org. They're an organization that will connect you with a local gun shop or FFL to store your firearm for you. Thanks for listening again. In the meantime, stay safe and stay vigilant. Are you ready to step up your shooting game? Introducing Walkers Inc., the pioneers in ear protection for shooting, hunting, and commercial applications. For over 25 years, they've been revolutionizing the industry, ensuring your hearing safety and enhancing your shooting experience. Anytime I'm on the range, indoor or outdoor, I use Walkers ear protection to have crystal clear communication with my fellow shooters. I personally use the disruptors for outdoor shooting and the recons for my indoor shooting adventures. Not only does it protect your hearing, but it also protects you. Being able to communicate with others on the range is vital to personal safety. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your safety when the ultimate goal is better self-protection. With walkers, you'll experience unparalleled comfort, unmatched innovation, and the industry standard in shooting ear protection. Don't settle for anything less when it comes to your safety and enjoyment on the range. You can save on Walker's ear protection and support the podcast by using code SHESHIELD20, that's SHESHIELD 20 at checkout. Again, that's SHESHIELD20 at checkout.